Good morning, listeners. You're welcome to this week's Ag Report. I'm Jim Finn. Later on in the programme this morning, there will be a feature on Bloom 2026 where I will be having a chat with Ros O'Shaughnessy, Jane Ryan, Jack Donovan from Nina, and Michael from Agri Aware. My first guest this morning is Michael Freeney from Chagas, and as you know, Michael is in the Clonmel office. Good morning, Michael, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Okay, good to have you back on again, Michael. Michael, you want to advise farmers with regard to grass at the moment and also with regard to second cut silage. So, there seems to be plenty of grass around at the moment, Michael.
There is, Jim. It's a good news. It's a good news story, but as you know, sometimes surpluses can create their own problems. Look, we've walked a lot of farms since we've been released in the office here from our base indoor duties. But look, from those farms and groups, look, it doesn't happen too often, Jim. It's a number of years, I suppose, since we've seen current growth rates of 80, 90, and some of the monitor farms come back. We see there the last few days, they've been growing 100 in the last week or so. So look, high grass growth, but it does generate unintended consequences. So I suppose like when there's too much grass, I suppose on dairy farms, it's going to reduce milk production, believe it or not. And on dry stock farms, it's going to, I suppose the measure of performance is reduce weight gain. The answer, I suppose, on most farms is to walk the farm. And we say to people, take out those heavy covers. Now, what's a heavy cover? Those people that are used to measuring grass or some way familiar with it, it's a cover of anything over 13, 14, 1500. Do you know, on some of those farms I mentioned that we've walked, we've seen 2,000, 2,500. And for example, a number of farms where they've taken out those wraps, they've come back with 4.5 bales and even higher, maybe 7, 8 bales to the acre, which is a lot of surplus grass. And in some farms it can mean 10, 15, maybe even 20 acres. And it's great. Because when those heavy covers are taken out, it's a win-win. So what's going to happen? You're probably going to end up with more milk yields. You probably can reduce the meal fed. And the other big plus, which you'd have heard last winter from a number of farmers, was when you take out those good wraps like that, you mine those, and they're going to come in with extremely good DMDs, and you'll have them for next autumn for milking cows in the back end, or in the following spring for cows that are milking again. I mean, they're going to be better than any silage you'll have in the pit. So it's a win-win. And the other thing about taking those out, so there's a number of things, I suppose. When you walk the farm, most people, even if they don't measure grass, they get a feel for the sort of covers they should be in, and they will when they walk. The trick is to walk the farm. So the trick, Jim, is when you take out those surpluses, and don't wait, because if you do wait, there's two things going to happen. You're probably with certainty going to run short of grass down the line, because you'll have waited too long for it to bulk up, and they'll be out for too long. And the second thing, I suppose, more importantly, is that you're going to blame us for telling you for advising to take out the surplus grass, and you may well get short. So the thing is to take it out fairly quickly.
Okay.
And the second, sorry, Jim,
sorry.
on that, I suppose sometimes we do forget, and we've seen that from monitor farmers, where K levels have dropped, where maybe over a number of years surplus grass has been taken off the same farms. Remember, if someone has a cover, maybe say 2,500, and we're talking about 4 or 5 bales to the acre, there's about 50 units of nitrogen taken out. There's about 8 units of P, and 50 units of K taken off that. So remember, when you go back with fertilizer on that, maybe you're looking at maybe 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 gallons of slurry with nitrogen. That straight nitrogen on its own won't be enough, or else 18612, whatever the case might be.
Right. Okay. Will there be a tendency amongst farmers to say to themselves, well, silage is going to be very expensive this year. The cost of wrapping at the moment has gone up considerably, and maybe they'll be saying to themselves, well, should we or should we not take out this particular paddock and wrap it?
Yeah, like Jim, I said, it's a win. I think it's a win-win.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't take it out, the flip side of that, what we're seeing at the minute is milk yield on the farms who are grazing high covers, and we've seen it through the groups and on individual farms. Milk yield has dropped more. Like at this time of the year, we're coming off peak.
Hmm.
Like over a month, you'd expect that maybe milk yield will drop maybe 10%, 2.5% a week. But like we've seen cases where maybe over a week, milk yield has dropped 10%, and that's a sure sign, in my book anyhow, that they're from what we're seeing, that covers are too high. We know from pasture based that I think about nearly half the farms have too much grass. I think
Right.
there's about nearly 50% have a cover per cow of 220, 225, 230, which is more than they need. We'd be saying maybe 170, 180 is the target. So we know that from the farms that are measuring grass.
Okay. Now you want to also, as I said at the beginning, you want to have a chat with regard to second cut silage and the fertilizer that would want to be used to make certain sure that somebody will get a really good second cut and have enough in the farmyard for the coming winter.
And so, Jim, yeah, that's a very, very valid point. You think back to the spring that we just had,
Hmm.
and maybe go back to a number of the wet springs that we had, maybe some of the wet springs that we had previously. The one thing sticks out in my mind that was very different this spring, and I would say the vast majority of farmers, I'd say 99% maybe, or very, very few, didn't have enough silage.
Mm.
And what those two things, I suppose. One is we had very good silage. If you can recall last summer of 2025,
Mm.
the weather was very, very good, and people got to cut grass early, a bit like this year. But the second thing was we had enough of it. We had loads of silage going to last winter, despite the fact that we probably had a spring that was very, very late, and maybe the silage requirements might have been maybe a month, I'm guessing, maybe more, longer than we would have expected. But so we had that. But what I can, from going around to people and talking to people throughout the springtime, we didn't have as much stress on farms and on farmers, because you think of those bad years and we ran out of silage. I mean, the stress levels on farms, and where do you go maybe when your neighbour doesn't have, and maybe on either side he doesn't have enough silage, and that brings us stresses. So look, what we're saying is assess what's inside in the pits. So for second cut silage, for most people, we're saying now however they put it out, it's up to themselves. But probably we're looking at 70 or 80 units of nitrogen per acre. We're looking at, certain, depending on the farm's allowance, probably 10 to 15 units of P and 60, 70 or 80 units of K. Now, if a farmer has enough slurry, we're probably looking at 2 to 2,500 gallons of slurry. Somewhere in there, we'll cover the P's and K's and top it up with the nitrogen.
So, and it's important that they get that out as quick as possibly, I presume.
Yeah, so we know. So last week there was a lot of silage
Mm.
cut, Jim, and maybe in some farms that the slurry has gone out for 2,500 gallons, like I said, and it needs to be topped up with now the nitrogen. We know from the phone calls coming in that a lot of people are thinking about or starting to put out the nitrogen.
Okay, anything else you'd like to say to a farmer this morning, Michael?
The only other thing, Jim, and maybe it might be for another day, but I mean, I mentioned the spring gone, the lesson we learned from silage, but we also learned it was a horrific spring. It was, like I said, it was maybe a month, 6 weeks longer than we would expect it, that wet weather. I suppose slurry storage was an issue. And we see from where farmers had enough slurry storage, the benefits of it, because probably when we see the fertilizer database coming through and people are getting tight on nitrogen, P's and K's, the people who have enough slurry storage maybe aren't quite as tight. So look, maybe people might have a look and see maybe what can they do. Sometimes, Jim, it might be, when we get those wet springs and wet winters, it could be shoots broken, it could be even around agitation points, maybe a lip that, when you get those deluges, that water can come in off the yard and into agitation points, into slabs. It might in some cases be as small as that, maybe reduce dirty yards as best they can. And I suppose beyond that, then you're looking at slurry storage itself. So maybe people might have a think about what they might be able to do. Maybe the first 2 or 3 pints are simpler, but if that's not enough, at least have a plan in place and maybe get planning, maybe apply for TAMs down the line, but at least think about it. Because it was an issue last spring. It was the flip side of what I said. We had the security of slurries of enough silage, but the slurry was the downside, I suppose.
Okay, well, look at Michael. For this morning, we'll leave it at that. I want to thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. That, listeners,
Thanks,
was
Jim.
Michael Freeney from Teagasc. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, Michael is in the Clonmel office. Listeners, my next guest this morning is Roz O'Shaughnessy from Bord Bia. I first spoke to Roz for the first bloom before it happened to try to inform the listeners that this event was going to happen 20 years ago in the Phoenix Park. And I suppose I've been meeting Roz ever since. And we're going to look back, listeners, before we look at some of the features that were at Bloom 2026. We're going to look back at some of the highlights of that 20 years. Good morning, Roz, and thanks for joining us.
Morning, Jim. Great to be talking to you here this morning.
Okay, before we went in air, I asked you, what was your first, I suppose, encounter with Bloom? So will you tell the listeners what you told me before we went on air?
Yes, well, I joined Bord Bia March 2007, which was just 3 months short of the very first Bloom event. So one of my very first tasks at that time was to help the then communications manager launch Bloom and this concept and idea of we were going to run Ireland's version of Chelsea. And I think that was kind of the initial brief. So my very first time and my very first job within Bord Bia was very much linked with Bloom. And in those very early days, we very much relied on our close working relationships with the agri media, who Bord Bia would have had good working relationships with, the likes of yourself, the late Sean McConnell from the Irish Times, the talented Ray Ryan of the Irish Examiner, and indeed Damien O'Reilly, currently in Brussels with ICOS, but at the time with RTE Radio 1. So that was my earliest memories of dealing with yourself, Bord Bia and Bloom.
And, looking then at the first one, as I said to you before we went on air as well, it was wet and windy.
And wild. You forgot wild, Jim.
Wild.
It was wet and windy, and unfortunately that weather stuck with us for not just that event, but the early years. We had a few wet years, unfortunately, and obviously looking back now, we were learning as we went. So I think we were talking that some of the maybe stands and features and gardens weren't as well structured maybe as they would be today. So we felt every bit of that wind on those early days.
Yeah, we definitely did. I know a neighbour of mine was there and attended many blooms afterwards with her wear, and we often reminisce about the wind on and the rain in particular on the first one. But look there were other that wouldn't be a highlight, but what would you, looking back now for 20 years and you've been there all the time, what would your highlights be as we went down through the years?
The show really has gone from strength to strength. We're obviously just coming back on the back of, the 20th event, and we're averaging in the region of 90 to 100,000 visitors per year. So it's really difficult now, 20 years, to pick highlights. But what I've really enjoyed is seeing how the show has evolved year on year, and you mightn't see it show to show, but if you look back in blocks of maybe 3 to 4 years, like we talked there about wind and rain and whatnot, but the scale of the show and how professional it is now and how well it's executed and run is genuinely really remarkable. And I know I'm biased, and I see the hard work that my colleagues within Bord Bia and the agency partners that we work with, and I see all the work that they do. But equally, I think from the visitor experience, it has come on leaps and bounds, and it's really amazing to see that now. There's definitely been moments along the journey. So I think once we kind of hit that 60, 70,000 visitor mark, we just moved year on year after that. The numbers went up, and the experience and what we invested in it in terms of planning and execution increased accordingly. And I think what I love now about the event is how, whether it be the show gardens, the postcard gardens, or features of the event, that everything now at the event reflects really what's going on in the current climate, whether that right now, I suppose, is sustainability, biodiversity, food security, and all the key themes that we're talking about year round. And they all come to life in a really creative way at Bloom. And I love that about the event.
Yeah, we never thought of those 20 years ago.
No, they weren't
they-
really on our radar so
No,
much. No, they
no.
weren't as consumers.
And a lot has changed in the 20 years that we're now talking, because definitely Bloom just gone, was very heavy on biodiversity, was very heavy. We looked at climate change. We look at, and particularly if you go to your postcard gardens this year, they nearly all had a theme got to do with the environment and the place where we live.
Absolutely. And I think, it started very much as a horticultural showcase.
Mm-hmm.
Many people would know Bord Bia for its food as the Irish Food Board and its association with food, but not so many people would have been aware that horticulture is within our remit too, and our responsibility is to promote Irish horticulture. And that's everything from from nurseries, landscaping, and ensuring that our horticulture sector, which is now worth about €1 billion a year, is promoted in an engaging and consumer-friendly way. And that was the origins of Bloom and where it started, and obviously it evolved into what today, I suppose, we categorise as a really good showcase of Irish horticulture, food and sustainable living. And I think that last part, you just mentioned it there, sustainability is a very broad term, as you know, Jim, but it's how it's become very much part of our everyday lives. And obviously that's really important from a climate change perspective and whatnot, but we try to bring that to life throughout the show, whether that be, as I said earlier, our repackaging, repurposing, recycling gardens, or whether it's community groups speaking at the event. And actually this year, we, for the second year, have just retained our certification as the only event in Ireland that has independent ISO certification for sustainability. So it's something that we've really worked hard on for a number of years.
Okay, you mentioned, you thought the idea originally was it would become the Irish version of the Chelsea Flower Show, and they're only a week or 2 weeks apart every single year. How have the gardens matched up with your knowledge of Chelsea? Because I believe that some of the gardens that I've seen, particularly over the last 5 years, would match and would do well at Chelsea every year.
Yes, I think so too. I've had the honour of attending not Chelsea, but some of the RHS shows in the UK. And as your listeners might be aware, all of our show gardens are judged by an independent panel, and many of whom have built gardens at Chelsea. One of our judges who's been with us for the whole duration of Bloom, all 20 years, is also one of the, holds the title for winning the most goals at Chelsea, Mark Gregory. And I spoke to him literally this week, and he very much echoed that sentiment, Jim, that our gardeners and designers have now come on so much that the standard this year, we had the most ever number of gold medals presented, with 11 gold medals from 19 gardens. And they do not award them easily, I can tell you that much. They give really strict parameters and guidance and steering, because obviously their own credibility has to stack up as well. But each of those judges would have commented this week about the high standards that the Irish nurseries and designers and landscapers have brought to the show, and how each of them, or many of them, could hold their own in amongst the best of the best in Chelsea. And I think it's important to remember that, often for show gardens that have been built at Chelsea, you're talking about significantly higher budgets, 800,000-900,000 euro possibly to build a show garden in some cases. And that is not the types of budgets our designers are working from. So it's remarkable that they have managed to, through really hard work and dedication, work their way up to such a high standard.
One thing I would say, having been at all bar one, I think, that we do the simple thing well.
Mm-hmm.
The simplicity of some of the gardens down through the years would appeal to an awful lot of people. They are not elaborate, they are simple, they are something that maybe you could see in your own patch.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was, again, really important part of it from Bord Bia's perspective. And the likes of Gary Graham, who started and led the event for many years on behalf of Bord Bia. And more recently, our show gardens are headed up by a girl actually named Kerry Gardner. And very much their intention when they're planning the horticulture content at Bloom was that this has to be within grasp for the visitors. You know, that doesn't, like, obviously you want to inspire and you want to give them the really top end designer look and feel and stylish gardens, but you need to balance that with something that yourself or myself, Jim, can go along, enjoy the show and maybe take something home and say, I'm going to try and recreate that. They talk a lot about DIY as in grow it yourself, but we like the idea of DIY gardens as well, that you take something home and you give it a shot. And certainly that would be something that would be very much intentional in our planning of horticulture content at Bloom. Yeah.
Okay. One last thing I would like to say to you, I really look back and marvel at how you handled COVID.
Yes, COVID obviously had a huge impact on, well, the world, I suppose. Let's go big here.
Yeah.
And then when you bring it back to Bloom, you know, the team, it actually coincided with my own maternity leave. So it wasn't myself who was involved that particular year, but we did 2 years of Bloom at home. And the team came up with really innovative ways of keeping this whole concept and idea alive through online channels and webinars and content through garden centres when people could escape. So they came up with really great ways of doing that. And we got a huge reaction when the gates reopened post-COVID. And you must remember, it was at a time that people really put a focus on their outdoor space and how much that meant to them. We also, as an industry in the horticulture sector, we saw a huge investment that people were spending in their gardens, because I suppose we didn't have too far to go in that time. So many people were investing in doing up their garden space, and pergolas and everything else came into fashion. So it was great for the show post-COVID that we retained the loyal visitor, but we also attracted a whole new range of visitor profile, and they've stuck with us, and it's great to see it. And the sector certainly enjoyed that bounce when it came to.
Okay, well, look, at Roz, we're out of time. I suppose we could talk for the next hour, but look, it was a pleasure talking to you as always, and I want to thank you on behalf of my listeners for all the work you have done to try to bring horticulture to the fore, at least if it's only for 5 days every June bank holiday weekend.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for all your support over the last 2 decades. It's much appreciated by all of us here in Bord Bia.
And let's hope we'll be around for the next decade.
How we will.
How we will. Listeners, that was Roz O'Shaughnessy from Bord Bia, reminiscing with me on Bloom. I'm here with a good Tipperary girl, all the way from South Tip. She's Jane Ryan, and I presume all the Ryans in Kilcorn will definitely know her. There isn't a doubt at all about it. And she's here with a Nature in Balance garden. Hello, how are you? I believe we're cousins.
Hi, Jim, we are. What a small world.
It's definitely a small world. There's no doubt about it. Okay, can you tell me all about this garden that's Nature in Balance? I'm looking at things that are growing at home on the farm in Ballynahoe, and they haven't been cultivated. They just appear every year.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jim, we're delighted to welcome you and everyone here to Bloom. It's the 20th edition of the show, and we're here today at the co-funded Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine and Bord Bia show garden celebrating organic food and farming. As you said, the garden is called Nature in Balance, and it's to showcase the balance between organic farming as well as nature. Like you said, there's a lot of things growing that you haven't even planted yourself, so it symbolises the natural balance between productive agriculture that organic farming highlights, as well as allowing nature to grow and to sustainably work together
and live beside each other.
Exactly.
So happens. Now, I know that unfortunately, from an organic point of view, the number of farmers that have gone into organics is improving, climbing every single year. But we're a long way off the target that was set.
Yes. So we have you're correct saying that, but we have seen substantial growth in the last 5 years. There's now 5,500 farmers or more in the organic farming scheme, up from 2,000 that were in the scheme in 2020. Right. So there's been a massive growth there, which is great. There's been funding from the Department of Ag, bringing in new farmers into the scheme. And this garden here, Borbia, is sort of showcasing to consumers what organic farming is about. And even so, across the 5 days here at Bloom, we're going to have farmers, organic farmers, producers, chefs here kind of giving an insight from their work in the sector and giving consumers that may not know or may know a little bit about organic farming, but sort of telling the story about what's happening on the ground, and I suppose the hope and the aspirations for the future of organic farming and food production here in Ireland.
Okay, now organic farming in our lifetime will never become the main farming enterprise. We'll have to produce food for the rest of the world as well, and those of us who produce organic produce at home, and I do it every year, I grow my own vegetables, but if I go back before I retired, I used to grow an awful lot of potatoes, and they weren't grown organically. So what is the aspiration? So where do you think we'll be able to get to, that we will have a balance, and this balance, and a different type of balance now, a balance between a conventional production of vegetables and organic vegetables?
Yeah, so the EU has targets, and so therefore Ireland has targets as well. So the target for 2030 is to have 10% of farming in Ireland to be organic. At the moment, it's at about 5%. And so, like I was saying, there's funding every year going into organic farming to continue that growth and continue that movement. Like you said, it's not going to, not everything, it just happens overnight, and it will be a gradual shift, but that's the targets that we're heading for, that 10% of farming land in Ireland will be under organic production. And in Europe, they're looking at, I think it's 25%. So, there are targets there that we need to meet.
So we will be well behind the European average. And
the other thing about Ireland sort of offers, because we have such a great pasture-based system and outdoor system, we're at an advantage, to be able to do that kind of farming here in Ireland.
Okay, can we get up from this lovely seat we're on and just walk around and tell me some of what some farmers of my generation might call weeds, and we now call them lovely flowers.
Yeah.
So can we do that, Jane?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, let's start here with this.
So this is rose campion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we need Linda here.
Yeah, we'll need Linda. So, like I was saying, Linda McKeown was their garden designer here, and I forgot to mention earlier that she won gold for this garden in the medium category, which has obviously been a great achievement. But yeah, so rose campion, there's thyme here, which although is a herb and used for cooking, it kind of looks a bit like a weed there. There's catmint here, the sort of with the kind of bluey, purpley flower. Among here along the wall.
You have native trees.
Yes, native trees, and also multi-species swords. So in there's yarrow, there's red clover, plantain. So there's a mixture of swords there, and although there's a mixture there, and it looks a little bit not like a manicure garden. It looks really peaceful, like a meadow, and there's been so many people that have passed here yesterday that just commented on how, you know, gorgeous it was, because it didn't look perfect, but it still had a really gorgeous feel and really peaceful and tranquil. Yeah, what else?
It doesn't have to look
exactly
aesthetic, does it? Really?
Yeah.
You know, can I ask you about the installation?
Yes. So it's a structure of a bullock, and it's actually going to go down to an organic farm in Tipperary after this show.
Right.
And so the farm basically where Linda drew inspiration from to design this garden. So it'll be great that it'll be reused down there as a showcase. And then this structure here at the middle, in the middle of the garden, represents sort of the heart of this sort of modern rustic farmyard, and the table here, so it's, you know, all around there's nature where, you know, food and plants are growing, and then all comes together in the middle and everybody sits around the table, and even there on the table you'll see the tomato plants, and this is where we're going to have the various talks throughout the weekend, which will be, you know, like I said, it'll be at the heart of the garden here.
Okay. One last question. Are you happy with the awards you got?
Absolutely delighted. And Linda has been coming to Bloom and designing gardens, but she's such a... Look, you can even see it yourself, how gorgeous the garden is, and so you're delighted. We're not really surprised, but we're delighted that she just got the essence of what we were looking for so perfectly. And because even all of these swords here were all taken up from a farm in Cavan, an organic farm. They're going to go back there after the show, and when they first put them down, Linda was saying to us that, you know, the flowers hadn't really popped through, but sure, now you can see so many flowers coming through the grasses and the red clover, and all the various other the foxgloves over there. So, you know, it's great. It looks as if it's been here for years. It just looks like a proper meadow. So yeah, she captured the essence of the brief so well. So we're absolutely delighted.
Definitely, Jane, the last thing.
Okay.
I'm looking at a lovely dry stone wall that fences us all in here.
Exactly.
It's fantastic. A dry stone wall. Yeah,
really gorgeous. And it kind of, you know, sort of little bit like what you'd see in the west of Ireland, and just sort of brings that rustic and natural look, and what the countryside looked like before, you know, maybe we started building on it, or, you know, it was just what was there before. And so it's all the different elements. So it's the plants, it's the stone, the trees, and like I said, the structure of the bullock up there, so all coming together.
Installation, as I call it, an art installation, and it's lovely, and you really get the feeling that it is a bullock, it's not a cow.
Exactly,
as normal. So it's very good. Thanks very much for having a chat with Tip FM here at Bloom, and are you going to stay involved in organics?
Yeah, so my role myself is that I work in Bord Bia, and I'm managing a European project which is looking to promote organic beef and lamb from Ireland within Europe, but very involved in what we're doing in Bord Bia generally, and I'm actually from an organic farm myself, so it's something that I'm definitely very passionate about. So yeah, I absolutely intend staying involved. So
right, Jane. Look, thanks very much for having a chat with us on Tip FM.
Thank you, Jim, for joining us here today.
Listeners, I'm here with Jack Donovan from Nina, and Jack has a garden here. He has been very successful. He has won a silver medal, and he has told me that it's his first time designing a garden for Bloom. Jack, congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's been a joy to be here.
Okay. I know you've been on live with Fran last Friday morning, but now that we have a little bit more time and we're not live, just tell us how you got into doing gardening.
So I got into this program itself through the Cultivating Talent program. Yes. So that's an entry form for first time garden entrance at Bloom. When it comes to actually designing gardens and working in this kind of a world, it actually comes out of my background in architecture and set design, working within events and festivals and building installations. So I've been focusing over the last while on trying to do more nature-based and natural installations, and had always wanted to explore this side further in terms of creating a show garden. And I saw the Cultivating Talent competition last year before Christmas, and I threw my hat into the ring, and lucky and delighted to be here.
Yeah, and you're getting plenty of footfall, which is great. And might I say that your garden is very, very different to all the other gardens that I've seen so far here at Bloom.
I would, I'd agree with that there. I try to set my stall out in terms of exploring a concept that isn't normally addressed in these more pristine, clean edge style show gardens. Mine is exploring an idea around how nature can take back control in urban environments, and is looking at naturalistic planting and successional planting. So focusing on species that are growing through the cracks and often not as celebrated as or what you might find in your local garden centre.
Right, yes, and as you said, growing in the cracks. You know, there are some lovely plants that grow in the cracks, or grow on walls, or whatever the case may be, that we really don't stop to look at them, do we?
No, we don't, no, and these are often things that people will pass by without a moment's notice, but in fact they often play a huge role in a lot of the species that would be pollinators, our bees, our moths, and especially those that exist in our urban environments need these to survive and continue to thrive.
Right. You've had the first taste of Bloom. Would you like to be back next year?
I certainly would, yes. I've got plenty of other concepts that I would love to explore, and would continue like to push the boat out and, you know, showcase my own unique style of design and gardening to the world. I think it's a wonderful platform, and that is just full of so much creativity and craft and skill.
Would you like to have one of these real big gardens? Now you're on one of the medium gardens. Would you like to have a really big one?
I think I would, at some point. Yeah, I think it would be worth going for, you know.
Right. And if anybody is listening to us this morning, myself and Jack, and if you would like to get involved in the gardens here in Bloom, why not have a chat with Jack and see, could you come together, and would you in some way support him in designing a garden that would be, I would imagine, looking at Jack here across the table, that it would be very different to a lot of the gardens that I'm looking at. So you might be lucky enough to make your name. So if there's any one of the big companies down in Tipperary who would like to get involved, why not make contact with Jack after Bloom, and you might all get together and do something very different for Bloom 2027.
I think so. Yeah, I would love that.
I'd say you would. Look at Jack, thanks very much. A big congratulations to you, and thanks very much for having a chat with Tip FM.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
That listener was Jack Donovan, a garden designer from Tipperary. I always visit the AgriAware at Bloom, and this year I've caught up with Michael Geary. You may remember the last time I spoke to Michael, we were in Gurteen College a few months ago.
That's right, Jim,
so it happened. Okay, this is getting bigger and bigger, your stand here at Bloom.
That's
it's
right.
massive this year.
It is, Jim. Yeah, look, we're getting bigger and bigger every year. This is my 4th year now at AgriAware at Bloom, and every year we've been adding more displays to the farmyard. Our bread and butter is obviously the livestock. We have the beef cattle, we have the dairy cow, and we have the sheep, and We obviously do the shearing demonstrations, we do the milking demonstrations, but as you can see, Jim, by looking around there, we have a lot more patrons involved in the work that we're doing here at Bloom to kind of give, I suppose, a more 360 of Irish agriculture and food production, because as you can see yourself here, Jim, in the middle of Dublin, you know, it's a great opportunity to be in a very urban area and I suppose meet those consumers face to face, which is the best way of educating them on, I suppose, where their food comes from and just about Irish agriculture and the work farmers do in general.
And how many, shall we say, sessions a day do you have here in what used to be the red shed, but changed colour?
Yes, it's changed colour, changed shape as well, Jim. Look, for the 5 days we're doing 3 shearing demonstrations a day, and we obviously then milk the cow morning and evening. It gets great attention every year, every day. You know, there's huge crowds here for the demonstrations, and they're very genuinely interested, Jim. I suppose that gap between the Irish farmers, the producers, and the rural or the more urban population is getting bigger and bigger, and we're losing that link with, I suppose, where our food is coming from. And there's great genuine interest here amongst visitors to Borby's Bloom about where their food is coming from, and you know, wondering about where their milk is coming from and how it's produced, how it's processed, where their beef comes from, and how the animals are cared for and looked after, and also the sheep as well. You know, the shearing, you know, a lot of people here that we meet are like, does not hurt them, and we obviously have the shearers here with Graham and Godfrey Pottering chatting to us and talking through it with them and saying, look, at this is just from an animal welfare perspective, this is why we do it every year, this is why farmers do it every year, and actually go through then as well, Jim, it's a lot making exercise as well, shearing, and that it's a cost to farmers, but it's done every year for the welfare of the animals. So I suppose talking about where the food is coming from, but also the welfare of the animals, is critically important when we're here at Bloom. As well as everything else we're doing we've obviously the machinery display, we have the grassland species display, the native hedgerow, as you can see there, we have the water recycling unit there showcasing how Irish farmers are reusing water on farms. We also have the display over there with the fruit and vegetables via our Incredible Edibles programme. So look, there's loads happening, Jim, here. You can see here today there's school kids going around the farmyard here. We have 1,000 kids between yesterday and today that are getting tours of the farm, learning about where their food is coming from. They're all urban-based schools in Dublin, in Wicklow, in Meath, Kildare. So look, it's great overall, Jim, and it's great to be here for a few days.
I saw tiny tots lying in the grass here, and somebody telling them all about it. That's the first thing you see when you walk in here.
Yeah.
It was very, very impressive to see the tiny tots and your team telling them all about food and food production.
And look at Jim, that's what we're set up for. We're 30 years this year now. 1996 we were set up, and look at that's our job. That's what the agri-food industry and the agri-food sector put their trust in us and support us to educate the people of Ireland about where their food comes from. And look, we're trying to do our best here at Bloom and every other kind of consumer-facing event that we attend.
Okay, and this tractor that I'm looking at, that's all part of your stand as well, or is it?
That's right, yeah. So that's McCormick Family Farms. That's their set up there, Jim. That's basically that machine there that you can see allows them to plant their lettuce in the ground. It's the only one in the country. It's a superb piece of machinery. It's their first year demonstrating it, or coming here to Bloom with us. Stephen there and Steve McCormick and the family and the staff there are there with us for the 5 days, showcasing that to consumers about how they grow the lettuce, at the different stages, how it grows and how the machine plants into the ground. It's very efficient, and I suppose, Jim, that's another point to add here. We're all about showcasing about where our food comes from, but we're also showcasing how farmers are becoming more efficient, you know, to make this food more sustainable, but keeping that quality as well.
Okay, and you have the Amazon spreader back again. That was here last year. That's a high-tech machine.
That's right, yeah. It's a bigger machine than we had last year, Jim. And again, it's just showing that efficiency on farm level that farmers are implementing there when they're putting out their fertiliser on farms.
And Michael, are you here for the whole 5 days?
We're getting a day break, Jim. So we do 4 out of the 5 days. Yeah, all staff get a day off. So yeah, it's not too bad. We can enjoy some of the bank holiday weekend as well as doing a bit of work.
Okay, well look, thanks for having a chat with Tip FM here at Bloom.
Thanks very much, Jim, for having us on again. Thank you.
That, listeners, was Michael Geary from AgriAware. That, listeners, is AgriReport for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll join me at the same time next week. Coming up next is the news at 10 o'clock, and after that, Eamon Dwyer presents Down Your Way.